Welcome to Demolition Success Secrets, the podcast that's changing the game for demolition businesses everywhere. Ever wondered how a wrecking ball wielding industry can leverage digital marketing to dominate their market? Well, we've got the blueprints, strategies, expert guests, and more to show you how. Stay tuned, because we're about to blast through the barriers of your business.
Hey guys, welcome. We have a really cool guest today, someone who is close to the National Demo Association as well, and someone who is really special in his knowledge and his capabilities. So really welcome, Nathan, and I think this will be a pretty fun podcast for our audience.
All right, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you tell us who you are and how you got to where you are?
Sure. My name is Nathan Brainard. I'm a regional president with Insurance Office of America, IOA, based in Orlando, Florida. And I've been doing environmental related insurance for the last 20 years. And one of my first entrees into that was through a Section 8A contractor based out of the Baltimore area. But was doing work in Florida. He got stuck in the Joint Underwriters Association, and he and I got connected, and we pulled him out, and that was my real first introduction to a demolition contractor. And I really enjoyed working with the guy and learning about what he was doing and hearing about the scope of his projects and overall work that he did. And it kind of really invigorated me. And then I got hooked up with a guy here in Orlando, Rich Lorenz, who had a company called Central Environmental. And he was a big proponent of the Demolition Association, and he kind of brought me in under his wing and introduced me to the people that he knew, and I've been engaged with the association ever since.
Awesome. So that's how you got involved with the industry, how you got involved with the association. Now, tell me about the association. Some of our audience right now, they may be kind of on the fence about joining it. They may have done it years ago, and now they probably should be more active. So what's that experience like?
I think the experience for somebody who's an actual contractor versus a supplier to the industry is probably a little bit different, but there are a lot of overlays that are there. There's a tremendous amount of resources that are available for safety compliance, furthering your education, things like that, where I've really had the best experiences with getting to know the members of the association. It's a very welcoming group. And generally speaking, they're very congenial. They've got open arms. They're more than willing to welcome you in. That's been my personal experience. I have seen where I've had clients that were not members of the association, and I brought them over, told them a little bit about what it was, the convention, the live demo thing that goes on, the resources that are available in different committees, and I've brought folks over, and they're still members, and they have stuck around because they've either developed really good relationships, they've gotten some really good quality information about the industry, maybe about their safety program, or maybe about different techniques and working methods. Maybe they met an equipment dealer that they were really fond of and were able to get some kind of opportunity that they wouldn't have normally had outside the association in that relationship. So I think there's a lot of runway for what the association offers. From a legal perspective, they're always engaged with the different fly-in days, and now they're starting to start very specific state chapters. Before it was only California, and now Florida has one. They've got a couple other that are getting ready to start. So they're really expanding what they offer, where they offer it, and how they're reaching their members. And from my perspective, trying to meet their members where the members are in their own state. So, my experience with the association has been great. As somebody who's not an actual demolition contractor, I feel like I've been welcomed, and I have some really good friends that are part of this association that I wouldn't have met had I not gotten engaged.
Yeah, and that says a lot, because our audience is mixed of vendors as well as actual owners, team members, executives, etc. And it's one thing to be an owner or an influencer to an owner, let's say, in a particular association, but even the vendor relationship, like you saying, it's open arms, is huge. That's part of what we're doing with this podcast is the NDA. If anyone's curious what association we're talking about, National Demolition Association. Their whole thing there can be very formal. I don't want to say suit and tie. With the podcast, we were actually inspired by the association, say, hey, is there a way that we can allow them to be the suit and tie and be a little bit more formal and for us to kind of be in the middle where we can have more regular podcasts, kind of button down conversations, have it with vendors, team leads, owners, etc. So really, really cool. I am curious, are you going to be in San Antonio in March for the 50th?
Well, I'll absolutely be in San Antonio.
Cool.
I haven't missed a national convention in the last 17 or 18 years. Since I got involved with the association, I've never missed one. So
wow. Okay. So anyone who's listening, because this episode is certainly going to come out before March of 2024. If you guys are listening and curious about the association, perhaps getting involved or kind of on board prior to that March, it's a big blowout 50th anniversary in San Antonio. You guys should probably reach out, be it vendors, be it owners, team members, etc. in demolition world. So that way you could potentially attend that. I think it's going to be really cool. We recently had a guest on, more of an old timer, vendor as well, but he has a lot of experience of actually being hands-on in demolition too, from kind of a prior life. And he was like, yeah, I'm making an exception to go out for the 50th anniversary. Typically, I haven't gone over the last few years, that kind of thing. I've been too busy. So I think that's really, really cool, guys. Tell me what got you attracted into this world? Like for me, I thought it was so cool that it's kind of like boys becoming men. You get to, whether it's implosions or you have the wrecking ball or excavator, what have you, it's kind of a fun business, and it actually makes money too if done properly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think every young boy for sure has had their experiences with building blocks in a crane, swinging something to knock something down, or taking some black cats and sticking them inside a building and watching it tumble down. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of that, and obviously as you get older, it's that coming of age kind of thing, like you were saying. Yeah, you get in there and you realize it's a really good group of people, right? And they're doing a service for our country that is very, very valuable. I mean, there's a finite amount of land, right? And we're not going to get any more of it. And so they really start the process of a reinvigoration project by tearing down the old and making way for what could be in the future. And I've that concept resonates with me. And once I started getting to know the people a little bit and how they do their things, how they do their operations, I quickly realized that the insurance industry has a stigma around demolition and what it is and what it entails. And they've got this vision in their heads that, it's a bunch of cowboys, shooting from the hip. They got a ball and chain out there, and they're swinging it back and forth, and the owner's riding on the backside of the ball to go through the side of the building. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's a highly regulated and highly safety conscious industry. And I realized that I had the ability to try and help these folks grow their companies by being able to properly articulate what they do and don't do in terms of their business and how they do it, the methods with which they bring down buildings, and kind of educating the insurance community. And, it has taken a little bit of time, but, through just constant conversation and trying to get, different carriers to come out to the convention and whatnot, I feel like I've made some progress. I feel like I've opened up the eyes to a fair amount of folks in the insurance industry to where historically they would say, absolutely not. We won't even remotely consider that class of business. To explain to me why I should underwrite this one. Explain to me what makes this one different from ABC Demolition down the street or whatever. And, a really good demolition contractor presents very, very well, both on paper and in person. And I'm a big advocate of having a conversation that includes the underwriter and the client together. So, because no one's going to be able to tell their story better than them, right? I mean, I can regurgitate it. I can slap some stuff down on a piece of paper and write a narrative or whatever, and I can probably do a decent job. But I'm never going to be able to tell the story of Bob at ABC Demolition, who's been doing it for 40 years. And, his father started the company. He took it over 15 years ago. I'll never be able to tell the story the same way he will be able to. And so, I feel like that has put me in a position to try and make people's lives better. And I want to positively impact the lives of those I come into contact with on a regular basis. And if I can do that either through my efforts, even if they're not working with me, but I can help them get better in the insurance market, then I'd like to do that.
Yeah, that's really cool. It is kind of interesting. My life has been kind of marketing centric, and I was a consultant coming out of school and different things. And, in the beginning of my career, I was kind of a generalist. Did you ever experience being a generalist in insurance, or was it immediately right into this particular world of construction demolition?
I think that everybody in insurance starts off as a generalist. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And then they either stay as a generalist because you know a lot of people in a lot of different industries, or you find something that really resonates with you, and the whole being a good steward of the environment, making sure that people are properly protected in the event that they hit an underground storage tank and cause a leak, or they, hit some kind of gas line and it's released in the atmosphere, or whatever, knowing that they've got the necessary means to rectify the situation, get it corrected, get it cleaned up, and keep their doors open is something that I was a big fan of. And so I don't know that I think if you took a poll in America of all the insurance agencies, you get a split down the middle, 50-50 you're a generalist.
Really?
Specialist. That's my assumption.
Huh.
That's how we're set up at IOA. We've never done a formal study, but if I were to look around the company, I think it's pretty even split between generalists and specialists. And we've got folks that specialize in everything from oil and gas and automated technology and AI to being generalists that write, a not-for-profit, a chain of restaurants, chain of gas stations, whatever, so it's a mixed bag for sure. But I do think that it's pretty evenly split. To me, the differentiator is what really drives the producer, the person who's selling the insurance, what drives them, I personally, I've got a limited amount of capacity in my brain, and I can't be all things to all people. So I thought if I learned a very specific area of, environmental insurance, anything with an environmental impact, I felt like that would really give me a leg up, because there's not a lot of people who truly specialize in that type of insurance. And so, if I can have relatively limited competition and decent company sizes to work on and decent premiums to work with, I felt I could make a very comfortable living, and so far so good.
Yeah, many years and counting. That's awesome. Was it challenging kind of bridging that chasm? Because what I'm trying to relay to our audience is certain demolition experts that are listening, maybe they're doing a 50-50 split, residential, commercial. Obviously, we understand that you got to kind of differentiate your income. Some of them may do full teardowns, while some of it they also are doing interior. It is kind of interesting because in my world of marketing, in your world of insurance, it kind of pays to be a specialist. Mm-hmm. And you do got to kind of build up a bankroll and some wisdom and connections, I would say, to kind of safely jump in the pool. But once you're in the pool, it's so much more comfortable than being a generalist forever. Like everyone, I guess there's a natural appeal to want to be a generalist. How long did it take you to jump in the pool? And what was that exact inspiration perhaps that made you, other than, your heart and soul saying, hey, I want to help with the environment, I want to help these people. Was there a moment or a certain time that went by that made you do that jump, or say that it was okay to take the jump?
I told you about that first account that the first demolition contractor. So that led me to a recycling operation very shortly thereafter. And, demolition and recycling are so closely tied together, as is waste. You can't tear down a building without creating C&D waste, right? Recyclable product. So what I quickly realized was that the three were really tied together. And I had some folks that I knew that were in some of those other industries. And when I started talking to other folks within IOA and asking about, who specializes in this, and, do we have a specialist? What markets do we have? And I realized very quickly that within IOA at the time, 20 years ago, give or take, we didn't have anybody that was truly specializing in environmental insurance. We had people that dabbled with it that were really good, but nobody was really specializing. I saw that as an opportunity. And I thought if I can make myself the internal guru on all things environmental, when someone has a question or when they need a partner on an account, I'll get that phone call. And through trial and tribulation, I realized very quickly that, again, there's not a lot of people that specialize in this nationwide, and that there's very few markets that are interested in it. And so, very little competition, few markets to do it with. Premiums tend to be fairly decent size. the stars were all lining up and telling me, like, if you do this, you should be okay. You know, I mean, I'm not going to say I'm not definitely the sharpest knife in the drawer, but I'm certainly not the dullest, you know? And so that one kind of stuck out to me as like, hey, you know, the light bulb's on, you got to pay attention to it or not. And so I just kind of started following it, and, you know, it's led me down a career of almost 20 years of specializing in environmental insurance, and I wouldn't trade 1 minute of it. You know, I've really enjoyed what I've been doing.
I love that. That's cool. And you kind of, it's almost like what bleeds through with pretty much everyone that we have on the podcast is they kind of have a culture of safety in their companies for the demolition companies themselves. Of course, vendors, it's a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, I could hear it that you're actually passionate. It's not just like a money grab. You know, some people out there, they're like, oh, I just do it for a living, blah, blah, blah. But the living comes from your passion, from your care, from your tenure. So that's cool. I'd be curious in that specialty. Obviously, you're specialized. We're specialized in what we do. How do you notice that goes with your actual clients, whether it's scrap, whether it's demolition? Do you notice that your most successful clients have maybe specialties per se? Of course, they may diversify, but does that kind of pop out, or are most of them still kind of, yeah, we do demolition, but we'll do interior, we'll do full tear downs, we'll do a house, or we'll do an arena? Is specialty something you see in some of your higher level clients, or are they more kind of across the board?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely see people that specialize, right? I mean, there is certain type of work where you've got to have the right knowledge base, the right equipment, the right personnel, right? I mean, you've got to have all those things lined up. And I don't care who you are in this space, you've got to have a good safety program. Yeah, I mean, you have to have that. Most of the larger projects require you to submit what your safety record is. They want to see what your workers' comp mod is, and you know that is often a factor in the evaluation process. You know, what's your mod? Is it above a 1? Is it below a 1? Is it all the way at the bare minimum? Are you riding above a 1? That's in which case you're probably not going to get the job anyway. So. I do think that there are definitely contractors out there that specialize and that they do some stuff. I mean, clearly, blasting, as an example, is its whole separate section. You need different kinds of licenses to be able to do that sort of thing. And I think that's probably why there's a small handful of those folks in the U.S. that are doing the work. Anything to do with, like chemical plants is usually fairly selective. You're getting into an area where you don't know what you might be kicking up if the foundry or whatever has been closed down for X amount of years. You got to go in there and really understand what you're doing. So I think that a majority, my personal opinion, the majority of the industry is doing the tear downs, and they may vary in height. XYZ company is doing residential, and this company will do residential and commercial up to 2 stories. And then these guys want to do commercial up to 3 or 5 stories. And, it just kind of moves from there. But obviously the larger the building that you want to take down, the more and higher priced and expensive equipment you are going to need. And you start getting limited capacity because of that as you go, just because not everybody has, a high reach that can get you up, 25 floors or whatever it may be, So I for the most part, I think that everybody's kind of got their spot. I don't know that you would really say that it's niche versus otherwise, or specialty versus not. I think that there are specialty areas in the demolition field, and that the people that are really good in those areas are really well known. And that's why you see them, not in like a specific geographic region, but going all over the country to do work, or in some cases all over the world. And that's the other thing about the NDA that I've always found fascinating is you can be a US based contractor, but you've got a specialty that someone in the UK doesn't have, or someone, somewhere else in the world. And so all of a sudden you start picking up these jobs, to go over and consult, or, maybe work as a joint venture or whatever. So I've always thought that was really neat, that it's not just specific to the US. And the NDA does partner up with the International Demolition Association, and they do some things. I know that they send representatives over to our event, and we send representatives over to their event. And in my time, I've really seen that relationship grow quite a bit. And it's been neat to see how the the folks in the UK or in Europe in general, and the folks in the US are coming together and really developing relationships and sharing best practices. So that's been pretty cool.
Yeah, that is interesting because we've definitely had guests from Canada. We've had inquiries from Australia and Europe and all over the place. Yeah, I mean, things like bridges, things like nuclear power plants. I spoke to someone just a few weeks ago, and I go, man, I really never had even considered that, frankly.
Mhm.
Like a lot of our clients, they'll do an arena as a big deal. They'll do a skyscraper on occasion. They'll do, manufacturing, industrial, all that stuff, houses, all that. But I had never, ever, ever considered that. And all the implications that came with that were mind blowing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I saw probably a handful of years ago up in the Northeast, one of the members was taking down a historical building and was doing it block by block because it was going to be rebuilt. And so they were taking down the building, they were labeling it, and I don't know where it was eventually being redone, or if they were just doing some remediation and had to rebuild it right there on the spot. But I remember, being engaged in a conversation at cocktails or dinner or something, and hearing about what the process was, and thinking to myself, man, like that's got to be just a nightmare to keep track of that information and make sure that every block is labeled the right way. And a historical building, it's only going to fit together one way. Some of those things are hand cut. So but I really thought that was pretty neat. That's just another area of specialization that you don't really see in a lot of other industries. I mean, the ability to take on that kind of project, document it properly, get it down safely, do whatever remediation is there, and then get it back up with everything in the right place. That's, there's a lot of moving pieces on that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like someone who really likes puzzles and they want to challenge themselves and do it in 3D while delegating it to their team, or, in certain instances, subs and things like that. That is very complicated. Was it, I assume, a big building or a smaller?
I want to say it was a church, but
wow.
I don't recall. That may not be right, but I want to say it was a church, maybe something at a university. It was one of those two, I think, but I can't really. I don't recall all the details about it, but I know that it was, if I do remember, it was a 6-story building that they were dealing with.
Whoa. Yeah, adding in this case, let's say it was the religious aspect, that's like a whole nother layer of, respect and doing it the right way. It's beyond just the historical aspects of people kind of going through with a fine tooth comb, but now we add in the religious part, and it's like, oh, we really, really, really got to do this just right. Man, okay. That's fascinating. Okay, awesome. Well, what I'd love to kind of dig into now that we got a better understanding of who you are and our audience is kind of like, frankly, building a rapport with you. What are some of those insights? I guess, for our audience, the two things would be demolition firms. A lot of them are full teardown, some do interior demo, and then also scrap. So could you tell us scrap recycling plants, that sort of deal? Could you maybe tell us some of the FAQs, the common things that come up with those businesses, the things that you wish you can just grab people and say, please do this for your own benefit in your business from a insurance perspective? If you have any of those thoughts, we would love to hear your insights.
The first thing I will tell you is that the amount of last minute requests that we get is through the roof. A lot of times there's a non-disclosure or something's going on if they're doing an acquisition. Sometimes it's project specific, but the more time that you can give your agent to get you what you need in order to meet the contract, the better. And there's so many times where we'll get a call 3:30 on a Friday. It's like, I got to have this by 5. 3:30 on a Friday. I mean, I'm good, but I'm not a magician. I'll do what I can. And then, usually we end up getting it done. But again, it's time is power, right? And so the more time that we have as agents, the better off we can be. The other thing I would say is, as it relates specifically to scrap, I'm going to lump waste in this too, because some of the folks have landfills or whatnot, or they do third-party hauling. So waste and recycling is the 7th most hazardous industry in the country, right? Wow. Demolition is not in the top 10, which is a fantastic stat. But waste and recycling is. And what we're having a hard time getting folks to understand right now, specifically around fixed facilities, landfills, transfer stations, material recovery facilities, scrap yards, et cetera, is the propensity for fire, right? And so what everybody's got to understand is there are only a handful of reinsurers in the entire world. In the same way that they buy insurance for their companies, insurance carriers buy reinsurance to protect them. After a certain loss, they're going to pass this on. And the reinsurers are the same reinsurers in the US as they are in Asia or Australia or Canada or the UK or wherever, And so when an event, let's say Florida, for example, we didn't have any hurricanes last year. We took one, went through kind of the crux of the panhandle, best area it could have possibly hit if it was going to hit Florida, right? Not a ton of damage. It was a good year for us by all accounts, right? But if there's a earthquake in Japan and there's an avalanche in Austria and there's a tsunami in the Maldives or wherever, those same reinsurers that we have giving our carriers their insurance are the same ones that are covering those losses that are out there.
Interesting.
And what happens is when a loss comes in, even if it isn't in the US, that hits the reinsurer. They don't usually know what their losses are going to be for 3 to 5 years is generally the time frame. But obviously larger events may take a little longer time for that to figure itself out.
Okay.
But what's happening is these facility fires are, the lithium ion batteries are getting into the waste streams. You get an operator that doesn't do proper maintenance on their equipment and they've got a fire, so on and so forth. And it has scared a lot of folks away from wanting to insure those types of buildings. Now, obviously, if you're a behemoth company and you've got premiums in the high 100,000s to millions, you're going to get a different look than Bob Smith down the street who's doing 8-10 million a year and just opened his first scrapyard, right?
Right.
I would say that for folks that are wanting to get into that space, if you're looking at a facility, talk to your agent, make sure they can get it insured and make sure they can get it insured at a reasonable rate, because before you buy and sign the contract, you're going to want to know what your exposure is going to be. And not everybody is as ethical or as scrupulous as other people may be. And so if the person that you're buying this from has been in this building for 50 years, their agent may have it classified as a warehouse and they don't know it. They're just paying the premium,
Right.
But you want to make sure that you understand what your real exposure is going to be and that your agent can get it done. And that's really more on the fixed facility side than it is on anything else. Property is tough anywhere that's cat exposed, catastrophic exposure, Florida, kind of that southeast coastal area, out west with the wildfires, central portion of the country with tornadoes and wind and hail and flooding. So I would say the more time you can give your agent to dig in and do the proper amount of research and legwork, the better off you're going to be when you try to grow and expand your company. If your agent is doing their job the right way, they should be as important to you as your lawyer or your CPA, because they're protecting what you built. And if they do their job the wrong way, it can have really serious and negative implications for the policyholder / business owner. And time is it's a very valuable tool for all parties. And so the more time you can give your agent to do their job and the more information you can give them to do their job, the better they can equip you and prepare you for what's coming. Yeah,
it sounds like good clients of yours are proactive and good insurers like yourself are proactive.
It's not just you can have really good companies that still sometimes come to you at the last minute. I mean, that's business, right? I mean, sometimes you get thrown a curveball and there's nothing that you can do about it. That hey, I just got this at 2:00. We got our arms around it. Now it's 3:15. We're getting it to you. We still got to have it by 5. That's when your agent's reputation and relationship with the underwriting community makes the most important, I guess. It's the most important time. They can pick up that phone. The underwriter's out of the office. They can call them on their cell phone or wherever and get them and say, hey, man, this is what I need. I really got to get this done. And more often than not, an agent that has those relationships and that reputation are going to be able to help you.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. However you want to tell this section, I'd be curious how you could, or how you want to approach it. Do you have any stories you could share that maybe have wisdom throughout them? We don't need to say names, or, however you would feel comfortable. But over your, 2 decades and growing of wisdom and experience, I'm sure you've seen some very interesting things that maybe the owners of scrap, maybe the owners of recycling, demolition. Could you give us 2 or 3 stories that could maybe impart some wisdom? It can be good or bad, from what occurred. And you could disclose as much as you're willing or able to. You could make up fake names or whatever, but do you have any good stories that can maybe shine some wisdom through to the audience?
One of them kind of ties back to what we were just talking about making sure your agent knows what you have going on. Insurance carriers will and often do go out and do inspections, and there's nothing worse than being an agent than picking up the phone and finding out loss control was just out to visit one of your clients and that they've got a set of operations you didn't know anything about because they just started. And whoever it is didn't pick up the phone to tell you. More often than not, in my experience, at least in the demo field, is when they get into recycling, and it's like, well, it's part of the demolition process. Yes, it is. But if when we have our initial conversation and we're not going through what the exposures are and how you're doing things or whatever, we've got to make sure that we account for this, because otherwise you might get, they might hit you with an audit, and what that's going to be. So the unannounced exposure from a loss control is one of my least favorites. And it comes up a handful of times a year. I mean, not that much. One of the better things that I've seen done is the way that the industry documents their process. If every industry would document things the way that the demolition industry does, I really feel like these plaintiff attorneys would have less leg to stand on, and I've always been really kind of taken back by the amount of detail some of the folks will do, pre and post pictures, pre and post surveys, vibration studies. There's all kinds of things that the industry does that other industries really probably could learn from it and get a valuable leg up if they were to start doing. Some of them are specific to the demolition process itself, so it wouldn't really carry over into other industries, but there's a lot of documentation in the demolition industry that I think ultimately works to be their best friend, especially in times of a claim, because if you've done it the right way, and I've seen some pre-demo checklists that are very extensive and very, very thorough. And as you go through them, I've seen the most recent one I saw was digital. And if you got to a certain section and you checked yes, it wouldn't let you go forward until you attach 3 pictures,
Wow.
A front and a side view of it, so you could get all the different angles. And that was the pre-series, the pre-series, which automatically creates a follow-up section in the post-series that says, okay, now we need 3 pictures of the same area. Yeah, assuming that the area wasn't taken down, but of the same area or whatever. And it's to protect them, and it's to protect who they're doing the work for. So I've always been a big fan of how they document things. See, things that may not necessarily be all that great.
He's repressing all the bad stories.
Well, I'm trying to think of the ones that I've seen. I've seen a couple where the demolition industry is very family oriented, right? So your grandfather starts the company, it passes to your father, then all of a sudden you're taking over the reins or whatever. I know we've got a number of member companies that are in that same conversation structure. Generally speaking, those families will start initiating, if you will, the younger generations earlier than the normal workforce would be, and so, obviously you're not sticking a 9-year-old behind an excavator and asking to go tear down a wall, but I have actually seen instances where that happened and a claim occurred and they were letting a 9-year-old operate the equipment. Yeah, they were. Here's why. Yeah, you got to explain that can be a tough conversation. And that's very rare. I mean,
Yeah, you got to make sure they're at least 9.5 years old.
yeah, right. Yeah, that's a very rare, probably poor example, but I had a claim that came about because of something like that, and so
Wow.
I would say that if you're going to do training, at least make it age appropriate. I
Sure.
mean, if you're going to bring your family, you're going to pass this down to your kids or whatever, you're eventually going to get them to that part, where they operate the equipment or they're doing this and that, the other. Build up to that. Don't just automatically assume because they've been around it their entire life and, you bought them a drone and some, remote control excavators or whatever, that now they can get in the cab and do something. And I got to tell you, in all honesty, I think that if you interviewed 100 NDA members, 99.9 of them are going to tell you they would never do anything like that.
Right.
To be fair, but
and it's caliber too. Like they're in the association. The people who aren't in the association, it's kind of like self-selective. Obviously, it doesn't mean necessarily that one is superior and one is inferior, but yeah, I mean, we kind of find that with the people that we talk to, there usually is a nice overlap of people who are always looking to seek the best wisdom, education, etc.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Well, I would tell you that from my experience, it's more likely to be the people that are not members of the association who are doing that sort of thing than it is the members themselves, because the people that are not members are kind of doing whatever they want to do, more of a fly-by-night, as it were. Not that all non-members are fly-by-night, but smaller companies that maybe just don't know what they don't know are the ones you're going to find creating that sort of situation and environment, as opposed to more established companies that are really trying to learn and get better. Or even new companies that have found out about the NDA, they're going in there. They're going and learning for a reason. They want to be better. They want to be able to create a safe work environment, make sure all their employees go home safely at the end of every day, and they get the project done on time and on budget and without any injury. 99.9% of the time, you're not going to have that from an NDA member.
Right. And it only makes sense too. You're talking about fly by night with certain operations. There's like so many reasons why that is what it is versus people who are seeking further education, which typically correlates to having a longer tenure. Like the business is challenging. It can be really amazing one day, and the next day you're not being able to collect on a massive milestone on a huge project, and you may be looking at bankruptcy. Like, there's so many things. Obviously not being able to get insurance for your next period because you guys were acting foolishly, or you hired some people that maybe you shouldn't have hired and they were acting foolishly and you didn't even realize, didn't have the right management or oversight. That's really, really interesting. Yeah, I think the people who treat it as something that it's, like you mentioned, a family business, or it's intended to be handed off down the road, they have a foresight and they're willing to do what it takes, versus the whole, truck in a truck type reference where it's someone who, they got a trailer, they have a decent truck, and they can hop around town, try to get some bids, try to be lowest, bottom of the barrel. And, we see that all the time with public work as an instance with the bidding.
Mm-hmm.
Our audience and our guests are not typically those people that are, willing to get into bidding wars and willing to be the cheapest price. Probably, again, that overlap with NDA of, these are more senior people. They plan on being business for the long haul. That's interesting.
Well, we've got a saying in insurance: if you live by price, you die by price, right? I mean, you get what you pay for, just like every other industry. And obviously, insurance is a tough subject for a lot of business owners because it is a huge expense.
Sure.
It's a top 3 or 4 line item for almost every company behind payroll and equipment and fuel, right? Is insurance. Yeah, but if your whole thing is, I want to buy the absolute cheapest price, you're probably not buying the right coverage. But for a few more dollars, which is usually not drastic, if you spend the extra money, you're buying real coverage. So nobody wants to live by price. Nobody wants to die by price. Price is important, but price should be based off of what you're getting for the dollar spend, not just the dollar spend.
Right. Well, and also it's more expensive to not have insurance, or it's more expensive to not have proper coverage. Like, again, that it's the beauty of the long-term vision, right? Like, people buy in to doing it correctly more times than not when they buy into the long term
Uh-huh.
versus the let me make a buck, let me see what I can pull off, let me scheme or do something cutting corners kind of thing. I do want to be respectful of your time. We have a few more minutes if you're open.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, let me understand. We have like starting a business, let's say. Most of our audience, most of our clients, most of the people in this world, they've done it for a little bit of time. But let's say you have someone brand new as an entity. However, they've been involved in the business maybe as a team member and executive for 10 years, 15 years. What would you tell a person like that from, I guess you'd say, ground zero to getting the right coverage and things of that nature for this new business?
Well, first of all, the ability to get coverage is going to be based off of the information that we can be provided, right? So I would tell you, if you're going to break out and you're going to start something on your own, have a really detailed resume. I mean, if you were running a food truck 2 weeks ago and now you're doing a demo, you want to start a demolition company, that's going to be that's an uphill fight, right?
Sure.
But if you worked at, if you worked for somebody in demolition, you've been doing it for 15 years and really got the bird in your saddle to go and start your own company, your resume is going to be very, very important. Have a pro forma, talk about what your business plan is going to be and how you're going to scale it over the first 2 to 5 years. Something that can be presented to the underwriting community to show them you've put a lot of thought into this. You've got the opportunity. You may even already have a couple of contracts that are lined up as soon as you can get the insurance, which is not uncommon. A lot of these folks will leave one company. They've got a relationship. It may be a smaller project or an interior strip out or whatever it may be, and they've got a relationship with the guy who's controlling the issuance of the contract. Have that information readily available, right? If you're going to have a website, be specific about what you're doing. Don't throw everything on there that you're doing the decommissioning of nuclear power plants and you're tearing down skyscrapers and smokestacks. And be specific. And a website is a sales tool. It can also be your worst enemy. And I've had multiple carriers where we have worked on accounts in the past. They'll go in and these guys are doing explosive demolition. Like, no, that's subcontracted. What are you talking about? Well, it's right there on their website. They got a whole video
wow.
of imploding a bridge or imploding smokestacks or whatever it may be. And be like, okay, yeah, that's a project that they did, but that was subcontracted out to, one of the blasting contractors. They're just showing that they actually have the ability and the relationships to do that sort of stuff. So be cognizant what messaging you're getting out there, because yes, the website is a sales tool, but it can also be a detriment to you. Financials, if you have financials, is great. If you're starting a company, you need to have some seed money from someplace. They're going to want to understand, do you have the funds to buy safety equipment? Do you have the funds to buy and service and maintain your trucks, your excavators, your loaders, your shredders, whatever you may have? Can you service those and keep them running in a safe manner, so that whoever is going to go operate it, it's A, the employee is safe, and B, the people that are going to be around the project are also going to be safe. None of this is rocket science, but again, information is power, and the more information that you can provide up front, especially if you're going to be a startup and you're looking to get into a space, those details matter. You got to keep in mind the premium. Say you're a startup company, your premium may be 15, 20,000, right? Whatever it may be. And you're looking at that as, it's just $15,000 or $20,000 worth of premium. That's true. But the carrier is sticking out at least $1 million, some cases more, And so while you're looking at it as a relatively nominal expense to you to get up and running from an insurance standpoint, the carrier is looking at this going, man, I'm going to have to justify to my boss and my boss's boss later on, if we have a claim coming in, as to why I was willing to stick my neck out on this thing. And so it's easier to get those carriers to move in the direction you need them to move and become more favorable or warm towards the opportunity if they've got substantiating data. And so that's what I would say is that, have your ducks in a row. Basically the same packet that you're going to take to the bank to get a loan would be very beneficial to give to your insurance agent and have them start the process. And they'll probably need more. The insurance community loves to hit you with supplemental applications and, loss control calls and loss control inspections. They love to do that stuff, and it's maddening. I get it. But at the end of the day, they're putting a fair amount of money on the line, betting on you to be successful. They want to know that their bet is as safe as it can be. Yeah,
right.
Money just like everybody else.
Sure. Yeah, you mentioned earlier too, like you need to have processes, standard operating procedures, SOPs, those sorts of things in the business. Like I work with a lot of obviously owners there who pay us and what we do, but we also get very close with the head estimators or the estimating team. We interact a lot with those guys, and it's funny because sometimes they'll pull me aside, on a phone call or a video call or something. They'll be like, "Hey man, I'm thinking about doing my own thing." And I'm like, "All right, you might want to think twice about it." Like you've been doing this for 5 years, you're making some sort of living. Like, how's the credit score? How is the capitalization behind the scenes? I don't need to get into your wallet, but let kind of air that out, because your boss has done it for 30 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're smarter than him. And I know I know you're the boots on the ground all the time and all these things, but at the same time, like there is credit to be given, because the boss, he's not always kicking his feet up. Odds are he's probably not doing that as much as some people would think. Bosses, like you said, dealing with premiums, dealing with multiple work sites, dealing with unions in certain cases. There's a lot of things that boss is doing that allows him to have the nicest truck. And he's done it for many years. And he started off probably rolling the dice, just like, some of these people that talk to me are debating doing. And I try not to be a Debbie Downer. I try to really be a supporter, but also give them some of the insight that you just shared. And obviously this is even more icing on the cake. So that's super helpful. I guess we'll cap this off, before you can kind of mention, how people can get in touch with you. We'll touch on that in just a second. Any 2 or 3 things that you would share that make the most successful clients you work with? It could be an insurance question or just a general, these types of businesses. Like, what are 2 or 3 things that you see them be able to go really blast off or stay well capitalized? Like, what are those guys typically doing, or ladies typically doing?
My most successful clients, I think, have probably a couple of similar traits. One, they include us early in the conversation so that we can advise and educate them on things that they may not be seeing or thinking about. Going back to the building, if they're going to get into recycling, we're getting engaged in those conversations, and oftentimes getting them a proposal so that they know what to expect if and when they were to buy that, so they can figure out, if I buy this, am I going to be able to cash flow? It doesn't really make sense. Is this really where I want to be? Maybe a different building in a different location makes more sense. So my most successful clients, they engage us out of the gate. They treat us like a business ally, and we do a lot of consulting with them and collaboration. There's a lot of teamwork that takes place. The other thing that I think makes my most successful clients successful is they don't try to be everything to everybody. They know where they're good and they know where they're not. They are willing to admit where they're good and where they're not. Some cases they subcontract out the area where they're not to somebody else that may be in the space, or maybe not even, let's say you're doing PCB and asbestos abatement and you don't have those capabilities or licenses in-house. Instead of letting the owner go out and contract that, you may have a relationship with another firm that can do those kinds of things. You can bring them in, that they're safe. It's knowing when to say, hey, time out. That's not my area of expertise. Let me go out and get, Sue Smith over here at XYZ company and have her do it, because she's the best in the area and I know it'll be done right and it'll be done on time. So to me, those are the 2 things that I've seen the most successful companies. Know what you're good at, know where your weaknesses are. Don't be afraid to admit that that's not an area of strength and that you'd be better off subcontracting it to someone else or referring somebody else in for that particular portion of that project. And, just engage with the folks that are there to protect you early and often, because if you're having those conversations and they have the time to do things properly, they should get things set up in such a manner that, heaven forbid something does happen, it's going to be covered because it's done right.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's totally okay to say no to certain opportunities.
And it's
Like you
okay
could
to
be a
say, I
cherry
don't
picker.
know. Yeah, I mean, it's okay that if somebody asks you a really technical question, that's a great question. I don't know the answer. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. I'm gonna come back and get it. I say that all the time. I get asked some really technical stuff, and it's like, that's a great question, but I'm gonna need to go and get the proper answer for you. Make sure I'm telling you the right thing out of the gate, because I don't want to tell you one thing and then have to come back to you in 2 or 3 weeks, tell you that I was wrong. I'd rather pause right here and I'll get the answer or make notes. Any other questions that I've got and do it all at once. Yeah.
And almost, this is kind of corny, but thinking of it in this perspective, like demolition owners, demolition team leads, head estimators, etc., maybe think a little bit more like an insurance company. Really look at the risk and reward of opportunities. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we hear that there are so many companies out there, the littler guys, the newer guys on the block, who are just bidding stuff down to the bare minimum. They're losing. I mean, the people we work with tell us this all the time. Like, yeah, I don't know how these guys are making any money. And the answer is they're not. They're going bankrupt within their first year. It's okay. I don't care how big or small you are, to do a kind of a risk benefit analysis like you would as an underwriter, and say, hey, it's okay if we only get a few jobs a year, if those are sweet spot jobs that we know we can do really great, whether that's financially as well as you have to be able to fulfill well. Can't just be, well, we're going to do great financially, fulfillment, who knows? Like, that's short-sighted. You got to cover all the bases. Maybe you can do the project really well, but the money's not right. It's okay to say no. Insurance will say no if they need to. So, like, treat it similar. That's fine. That's acceptable.
Yeah. You more often than not, in my experience, you can't sell your way out of, a hole you keep digging. If you underbid a job thinking that you're going to be able to get ahead, and then you have to underbid the next one, you have to underbid the next one. All of a sudden you got 3 underbid jobs, and now you're trying to find one you can pad to start getting you out of that hole. My experience has been that doesn't usually work out that way.
Right. Yeah. And crossing your fingers on scrap in certain cases is not always going to be the answer either. Because some people, I've heard very interesting stories, paying to do a job on the basis of scrap. And now who's going to pay the most to the client to be able to have that right for scrap? And in some instances, that makes sense. I think if you're more senior, experienced, been around the block, you're better at making those shots, making those calls. All right. Awesome. Well, I love it. This has been super informative. Tell us, who should reach out to you, geography wise, captive agent or not? Is that relevant? How do they get in touch with you, and who should get in touch with you?
Sure. So anybody in the demolition, waste, or recycling space, I'd be happy to have the conversation. I work nationwide. Our company is nationwide. And, I'll be at the demolition convention. I'll be walking around on the floor. I won't have a booth, but I will absolutely be there. I'm pretty easy to find. But you can always get me via email or via cell phone, or my office phone for that matter. And my email is nathan.brainard@ioausa.com. And my direct line is 407-998-5287. And, I'm happy to answer questions for people that just have questions. Obviously love to work with anybody that's got a legitimate need, and see what kind of expertise we can bring to the equation to help them.
Yeah, and he'll even help people if you're calling at 3:30 and stuff's needed at 5 on occasion for select people. Let's not try to do that.
Be an existing client. That's got to be an existing client. I can't help somebody brand new that fast, I don't think. But you never know.
That's hilarious. But yeah, awesome, cool. Well, Nathan, super helpful. Really, really enjoyed it. It's almost the accounting world, insurance. Sometimes people go, oh, it's going to be dry. It's going to be just numbers, blah, blah, blah. But I think you really brought some fun into this, and obviously you're super experienced. So anyone who's listening, guys, if you have needs or potential needs, right? We don't need to get to the point that it's needed yesterday. You could reach out to Nathan, however, but preferably you guys are a little bit more proactive. Now you have someone you could trust to cover you on these bases. So thank you, Nathan, for being on the podcast. And thank you guys so much for listening to another episode.
Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. All righty, Nathan.
That's a wrap for this episode of Demolition Success Secrets. Stay tuned and subscribe for more explosive insights from our upcoming episodes. Until then, continue to blow up your demolition business and make the competition rubble in your path.